3 days after open-heart surgery, I sent a simple text asking my family to pick me up. My son replied, "Fourth quarter's almost over. Grab a cab, Dad." They thought that message was the end of it. By the time they finally started calling me, I was already gone. Little did they know, a single signature was about to completely upend their lives. If you appreciate deep, emotional stories about family choices and their ultimate consequences, please consider liking this video and subscribing to stay connected. I'd also love to know where you're listening from. Your comments help these stories reach others who might need them. Before we begin, a brief note. This story contains dramatized elements to highlight its core themes and lessons. Any resemblance to real events is purely coincidental, and the narrative is intended to provoke thoughtful reflection. The automatic doors of Mercy Hospital slid open, and a blast of sterile, air-conditioned chill hit me, making my chest ache. I sat in the wheelchair, tightly clutching a small plastic bag containing my personal items, my wallet, my keys, and a photograph of my late wife, Coretta. The incision right down the center of my chest felt like it was on fire. It had been only 4 days since the surgeon had to cut through my sternum to repair the valve that had kept me going for 70 years. Every breath was a struggle. Every movement felt like a sharp electric current running through my ribs. I checked the wall clock. It was 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. The lobby was bustling. I saw a young mother rush forward to greet her husband, handing him a get-well-soon balloon. I watched a teenage boy help his grandfather into a car, carefully holding the older man's walker. I saw love in action. I saw responsibility. And there I sat, practically invisible, tightening my grip on my phone. I opened the group chat named The Bennetts. It used to be lively. Coretta used to post Bible verses and recipes in there. Now, it was mostly just unread updates from me. I typed slowly, my fingers rough and calloused from 40 years as an auto mechanic. "Doctor cleared me to leave. Can someone pick me up? I'm at the main entrance." I hit send. The message immediately showed as delivered. Then read. I waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The pain in my chest throbbed to the rhythm of my heartbeat. I shifted in the wheelchair, trying to find a position that didn't make me want to yell out. I watched 3 dots appear on the screen, showing someone was typing. Then, the dots vanished. They reappeared. Finally, Terrell sent a message. "Dad, just call an Uber. It's the 4th quarter. Tied game. I can't leave right now." I stared at the screen. Terrell is 32. He is my only son. I used to work double shifts at the garage to pay for his college tuition, coming home with oil permanently stained under my fingernails. I had paid off his credit card debt 3 times. I let him and his wife move into my mortgage-free house for free because he said he needed to save money while looking for a job. He's been looking for a job for 2 years. And now, he couldn't spare 20 minutes to pick up the father who gave him life because of a football game. Before I could even process the sting of his rejection, another message popped up. It was from Paige, my daughter-in-law. She's 28, pale, with eyes that always seemed to be appraising the value of everything in my house. She never liked me. She tolerated me only because I paid the bills. "Honestly, Langston, maybe you should have asked the doctor to keep you another week. It's been so quiet at home without your coughing keeping us awake. We're finally getting some good sleep. Just get a cab." I lowered my phone. My vision blurred, and my eyes welled up, not from sadness but from a sudden, sharp burst of anger. This anger instantly masked the physical pain in my chest. They were living in my house, the house Coretta and I bought in 1985. The house we scrubbed, painted, and renovated with our own hands. They ate my food, watched my 85-inch TV, used the high-speed internet I paid for, and they couldn't even bother to drive 20 minutes to bring me home. They didn't just see me as a nuisance. They treated me like a noisy piece of old furniture, a broken appliance they wished they could just toss to the curb. "Mr. Bennett," I looked up. A nurse was standing there. She looked young, maybe Paige's age, but her eyes held a warmth my daughter-in-law never possessed. She looked at my phone, still glowing on my lap, and then at my face. She saw the heavy reality setting into my eyes. She understood. Nurses always know when a patient has nowhere to go. "Is your ride delayed?" she asked gently. I cleared my throat, trying to suppress the urge to cough, because I could still hear Paige mocking me in my head. Something like that," I rasped. "We can call social services, Mr. Bennett," she said, lowering her voice so others wouldn't hear. "They have voucher programs for seniors without family support. We can arrange medical transit. It might take a few hours, but they'll get you home safely." Social services. Those words hit me harder than the surgery. I wasn't a charity case. I was Langston Bennett. I was the head deacon at my church for 15 years. I was the man who fixed half the cars in this neighborhood. I had savings. I had dignity. Or at least, I thought I did. "No," I said, my voice firm despite my weakness. "I don't need charity." "But sir, you just had major surgery. You shouldn't be alone." "I'm not alone," I lied. I told them not to come. I didn't want to ruin their game." The nurse looked at me with deep pity. That look was the final straw. I hated pity. I hated that my son had reduced me to a pitiful old man in a wheelchair, having to lie to a stranger just to protect his pride. I pushed myself up from the chair. The sharp pain from my sternum was blinding, like a hot iron twisting in the center of my chest. I grit my teeth, forcing my legs to support my weight. I wouldn't let them see my weakness. I wouldn't let Tyrell and Paige win. "Mr. Bennett, please sit down," the nurse urged, reaching out to steady me. "I'm fine," I snapped, pulling my arm away. "I'm walking out on my own." I took one step, then another. I walked toward the glass automatic doors, clutching that small plastic bag tightly against my chest like a shield. I stepped out into the muggy afternoon air. The city noise was deafening. Sirens, car horns, people talking. I made it to the curb and raised my hand to hail a cab. My arm was shaking, and my knees felt like water. But I stood up straight, refusing to lean against the wall. A yellow cab pulled up. The driver was an older man with a graying beard and kind eyes. He took one look at me, saw the hospital wristband, noticed the way I was holding my chest, and immediately jumped out to open the door for me. "Easy, friend," he said, guiding me into the back seat. "Take your time." I collapsed onto the vinyl seat, gasping for air. The physical effort had almost made me black out. "Where to?" the driver asked, watching me through the rearview mirror. I gave him my address. That was my home, the home I built, the home where my wife passed away in my arms, the home now occupied by two freeloaders who wished I would never return. As the cab pulled away from the hospital, I pulled my phone from my pocket. I took one last look at the group chat. Tyrell had sent a gif of a football player dancing. Paige replied with a heart emoji. They were celebrating. They were glad I was gone. They thought I was just a foolish old man who would quietly take this abuse and come crawling back for a shred of affection. They thought they held all the cards. I watched the city blur past the window. I felt the scar beneath my shirt. My heart was weak, yes, stitched and bruised, but it was still beating. And as long as it kept beating, I was still the head of this family. I opened my bank app and checked my balance. I checked the house deed, an electronic copy saved in my secure folder. Everything was in my name. Everything. I turned off the phone. "Driver," I said, a sudden cold strength returning to my voice. "Pull over at that convenience store up ahead, the one on the corner of MLK Boulevard." "You sure? That's a rough area," the driver warned. "I'm sure," I said. "I need to pick up a few things, and I'm feeling lucky today." I didn't know it then, but that stop would be the most important decision of my life. I was about to walk into a situation that would test my heart far more than surgery, and I was about to buy a little piece of paper that would completely turn the tables on Terrell and Paige. And that shift would hit them so hard, they wouldn't know what hit them. The cab driver hesitated, but pulled over anyway. I needed water, I needed aspirin. And for some reason, I felt Coretta's spirit whispering to me. She used to buy a lottery ticket every Tuesday. She never won more than $10. But she always said, "Lang, you never know when the Lord will bless you." I fought through the pain to step out of the cab and into the convenience store. The air smelled of stale coffee and cleaning chemicals. I didn't know that within the next 10 minutes, I would face a weapon and end up holding an $80 million ticket. But right then, all I knew was that I was heading back to a battlefield, and I intended to win. The cab smelled like a mix of pine air freshener and old tobacco. But to me, it smelled like freedom. The license on the dashboard listed the driver's name as Ali, and he watched me through the rearview mirror with genuine concern. He had dark skin and the tired look of a man who worked 14-hour days to support the people he loved. He reminded me of myself 20 years ago, coming home with grease under my nails and an aching back, just so Terrell could have food on the table. "You okay back there, sir?" Ali asked, his heavy accent drawing from somewhere like Somalia or Ethiopia. "You're holding your chest like it hurts. You want me to turn up the AC?" "I'm all right, son," I wheezed, adjusting my position to find a spot where my sternum didn't feel like it was splitting open. "Just a bit sore. Had surgery a few days ago." "Surgery?" Ali shook his head, his eyes wide. "And nobody came to get you?" "No son, no daughter." "That's not right. In my country, the elders are kings. Families fight for the honor of driving them. If my father were sick, I would sleep on the floor by his bed. I would never let him take a yellow cab home." His words stung worse than the iodine they put on my wounds. This stranger, a man who probably hadn't seen his own father in years, showed me more respect in 5 minutes than my own son had in 5 years. Terrell was probably on the couch right now, drinking beer I paid for, yelling at the TV while his wife complained about the electric bill. "Everyone's busy these days," I lied, looking out the window to avoid Ali's gaze. "Everyone's working." Ali didn't say anything, but I saw his brow furrow. He knew I was lying. We drove in silence for a few blocks until the brake lights ahead turned into a sea of red. Traffic was deadlocked. We were stuck on the edge of the east side, a neighborhood that had seen better days. Now the buildings were boarded up, and the brick walls were covered in graffiti like old scars. Young men stood on the corners, watching the traffic with hungry, desperate eyes. "Looks like we're stuck," Ali said, tapping the steering wheel. "Protest or an accident up ahead. We might be here a while." My throat felt like sandpaper. The hospital air had dried me out, and the stress left a taste of old coins in my mouth. I looked to the right and saw a flickering neon sign through the dusk, a convenience store. It looked run down with bars on the windows and a door that looked like it had been kicked in more than once. But it was open. "I need some water," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "I'll be right back." "Sir, you shouldn't go in there." Allie turned around to warn me. "That's no place to walk around, especially with that hospital band on your wrist. Let me go for you." "No," I insisted, pushing the door open. "I need to move. I need to feel my legs. Just keep the meter running." I stepped onto the cracked sidewalk. The thick, heavy air hit me instantly. I leaned heavily on the cane the hospital physical therapist had insisted I take. It was a sturdy metal rod, and right now, it was the only thing keeping me upright. I walked toward the convenience store entrance, ignoring the stares of two teenagers leaning against the brick wall. They looked at my white hair and slow pace like they were looking at prey. I gave them the hard look of a man who spent 40 years in an auto shop, dealing with every kind of scammer and hustler. They looked away first. The bell above the door jingled as I pushed it open. The clerk was a middle-aged Asian man, standing behind a sheet of plexiglass thick enough to stop a bullet. He looked up from his phone, his eyes wary. "Just water," I mumbled, making my way to the coolers in the back. I grabbed a bottle of water and a small pack of aspirin. My chest was pounding hard, dull thuds syncing with my heartbeat. As I walked back to the counter, my eyes drifted to the lottery machine. The Powerball jackpot was up to $80 million. Coretta used to play every week. She had a system. Her birthday, our anniversary, the day we bought the house. She never won more than a free ticket, but she always said it was about the hope, not the money. Buying one felt like having a conversation with her. "Give me 2 Powerball tickets," I said, placing the water and aspirin on the counter. The clerk pressed the buttons. "You want to pick your numbers or quick pick?" "I'll pick," I said. 4, 12, 19, 85, and 7. 7 was Coretta's lucky number. The machine whined and spit out a small slip of paper. I handed the clerk a $20 bill, my fingers trembling slightly. Not from fear, just weakness. I was tired, incredibly tired. Suddenly, the door flew open. The bell jingled violently. 2 men rushed in. They wore ski masks and baggy hoodies. The tall one held a handgun. It looked cheap, maybe a Saturday night special, but a bullet is a bullet. "Open the register," the armed man shouted, waving the weapon at the clerk. "Open it now or I'll end it for you." The clerk froze, hands in the air, his face turning pale. "Please, take it. Take it all." The second man jumped over the counter and started shoving cartons of cigarettes into a duffel bag. I stood by the lottery machine, gripping my cane. To them, I was invisible. Just an old man in the corner. A piece of furniture, the same way Tyrell and Paige saw me. "Hey, old man," the gunman shouted, turning to face me. "Drop the wallet. Throw it on the floor." I looked at him. I looked at the shaking gun in his hand. He was young, maybe Tyrell's age. He was scared, but he was dangerous. I reached into my pocket slowly. My chest screamed in protest. "Hurry up, old man," he yelled, taking a step toward me. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the medication. Maybe it was the pain. Or maybe it was the realization that I had spent my whole life playing by the rules, working hard, only to end up facing a gun in a convenience store while my son watched football. I was tired of being the victim. I pulled out my wallet, but I let it drop to the side, breaking his focus for a fraction of a second. As his eyes followed the wallet down to the dirty tile, I shifted my weight. I was a mechanic. I understood leverage. I understood torque. And I knew that a metal cane, with the full weight of a 200-pound man behind it, was enough to break bone. I didn't think, I swung. I brought the cane down in a vicious arc, aiming not for his head, but for his wrist. The sound was sickening, a loud crack like a dry branch, snapping in a storm. The gunman let out a sharp howl of pain, and the pistol clattered to the floor. Before he could recover, I drove the rubber tip of the cane hard into his midsection. It was a move I learned on the schoolyard 50 years ago. He doubled over, gasping for air. The second robber peeked over the counter, his eyes wide with terror. He saw his partner on the floor, clutching a broken wrist and writhing. He saw me, a 70-year-old heart patient, standing there with gritted teeth, panting like a steam engine, holding a metal cane like a warrior wielding a sword. He didn't want to find out what I'd do next. He scrambled over the counter and sprinted out the door, leaving his partner and the cigarettes behind. The gunman on the floor tried to reach for the weapon with his good hand. I brought my foot down on the gun, pinning it with my heavy orthotic shoe. "Stay down, son," I growled, my voice rumbling deep in my chest. "Unless you want me to break the other one." The clerk was already on the phone, yelling for the police. I leaned heavily against the counter, the room spinning. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain came rushing back like a tidal wave. My chest felt like it was on fire. I panted heavily, clutching the counter to keep from falling. "Sir, please sit down." The clerk came around the plexiglass to help me. "You saved me. You saved my life." I sat on a milk crate, breathing hard. The gunman was sobbing on the floor, cradling his arm. I looked at him, and I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. He was just another lost boy who made the wrong choices, just like Terrell. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Blue and red lights flashed against the store windows. Within minutes, the place was crawling with police officers. And then, the cameras arrived. Apparently, a news crew was nearby covering the traffic jam. When they heard the call on the police scanner about an active robbery with a senior citizen fighting back, they descended like vultures. I walked out of the store, assisted by a paramedic who wanted to take me back to the hospital. "No hospital," I insisted. "I'm going home." A young female reporter with perfect hair and a microphone pushed her way to the front. "Sir, can you tell us what happened in there? We heard you fought off an armed robber with a cane. Is that true?" I looked at the camera. I saw the blinking red light. I knew this would be on the evening news. "I just wanted some water," I said, my voice raspy and tired. A man should be able to buy water without a gun in his face. "You're a hero, sir," the reporter said. "You just had heart surgery. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said, 4 days ago. "And you still took him down. That's incredible. What gave you the strength?" I felt the pocket of my shirt. The ticket was there, crumpled and warm against my chest, right next to the long, angry scar on my sternum. "I just wanted to get home," I said. "I have a son waiting for me." The lie tasted bitter. My son wasn't waiting for me. He was just tolerating me. "Can we get your name, sir?" the reporter asked. "Langston Bennett," I said. The paramedic checked my vitals. My blood pressure was up, but my heart was holding steady. It was a tough old heart. It had survived grief, poverty, and betrayal. A robber was nothing compared to that. I saw Ali, the cab driver, standing by his car, waving at the police to let him through. He had waited. He didn't drive off. "My ride is over there," I said, pushing past the reporter. "Mr. Bennett, just one last question," she called out. I ignored her. I climbed slowly back into the cab, feeling every bruise and every stitch. Ali looked at me with wide eyes. "You are a crazy man, Baba," he said, shaking his head but smiling. "You handled the bad guy. You look like a movie star." "Just drive, Ali," I said, closing my eyes. "Take me home." As the cab pulled away from the chaos, I reached into my pocket and pulled out that slip of paper. The lottery ticket. I smoothed it out over my knee. 4, 12, 19, 85, 7. I didn't know if those numbers were winners. I didn't know if those were winners. I didn't care. I just folded the ticket carefully, making sure the edges were neat, and slid it into my breast pocket right against my heart. It stayed there, a thin layer of paper separating my skin from the world. I didn't know it then, but that piece of paper was a bomb waiting to go off. And when it exploded, it was going to blow the roof off that house on MLK Boulevard and expose every single lie in its foundation. I leaned my head back against the seat, watching the city lights blur. I was going home, but it wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was enemy territory, and I was walking into it wounded, but holding something far more dangerous than a cane. I held the truth. And tonight, everyone in this city, including my ungrateful son and bitter daughter-in-law, was going to find out exactly who Langston Bennett really was. The cab's taillights vanished into the darkness, leaving me alone on the cracked concrete of my driveway. The house stood before me, a 2-story brick colonial that had taken me 30 years to pay off. I knew every shingle on that roof. I knew every squeak in the floorboards. Tyrell had been a toddler when Coretta and I planted that oak tree in the front yard. Now it was massive, casting long shadows across a lawn that badly needed mowing. I limped toward the front door, gripping the plastic bag with my hospital belongings. The wind picked up, cutting through my thin jacket and deep into my bones. My chest throbbed, a dull ache that pulsed with my heartbeat. Every step was a negotiation with pain. I just wanted my bed. I wanted my pillow. I wanted to smell the faint scent of lavender that still lingered on the sheets in the master bedroom, even after all these years since Coretta passed. I reached for my keys, my fingers trembling slightly from exhaustion. I found the brass key, the one I had used every single day for 2 decades. I slid it into the deadbolt. It wouldn't turn. I frowned, thinking maybe I had the wrong key. I tried again, jiggling it, pushing it, pulling it out a fraction of an inch. The key remained rigid. The lock felt different. Tight. New. I stepped back and looked at the hardware. It was a shiny smart lock, complete with a keypad and a camera lens. They had changed the locks. My son and his wife, while I lay in a hospital bed with my chest cut open, had locked me out of my own home. A wave of dizziness hit me. I had to lean against the door frame to keep from sliding down the brick wall. It wasn't just physical weakness. It was the sheer blinding arrogance of it, the disrespect. I raised my hand and knocked. The sound was hollow against the heavy wood. Silence. I knocked again, harder this time, ignoring the sharp pain that shot through my shoulder. "Tyrell, Paige! Open up! It's me!" I waited. Through the living room curtains, I could see the blue flicker of the television. I knew they were inside. They could hear me. They were choosing not to answer. 5 minutes passed. The wind turned biting, stinging my face. I was shivering, and shivering was dangerous for my incisions. I felt like a beggar on my own porch, a stranger pleading at the gates. I took the handle of my cane and banged it against the door. The metal made a loud, angry racket. "Open this door, Tyrell!" Finally, the porch light clicked on, blinding me for a second. I heard the electronic buzz of the new lock disengaging. The door opened, but only halfway. Paige stood there, blocking the entrance. She was wearing a silk robe I recognized from a luxury catalog that had arrived at the house last week with her name on it. In her hand, she held a glass of white wine. The condensation on the glass told me it was perfectly chilled. A sharp contrast to me, shivering on the doorstep. She looked me up and down, her expression a mix of annoyance and mild disgust. She didn't step back to let me in. She didn't ask how I was. She just took a sip of her wine and sighed. "You're making a lot of noise, Langston," she said. "The neighbors are going to complain." I tried to step forward, but she didn't budge. "You changed the locks," I said, my voice raspy and thin. "We had to," she replied, smoothly, not a hint of remorse in her tone. "For security. You know how this neighborhood is getting. We were going to give you the code later. We just didn't expect you back so soon." Back. She said it like I was a guest who had overstayed his welcome, not the owner of the property. "Let me in, Paige," I said, tightening my grip on my cane until my knuckles turned white. "I need to sit down." She hesitated for a split second, seemingly weighing whether keeping me out on the porch was worth the effort. Then, with a massive roll of her eyes, she stepped aside. "Fine, but try to keep it down. Terrell's watching the game, and he's had an exhausting day." Exhausting. My son was sitting on my couch, exhausted, while I was recovering from open-heart surgery and surviving an encounter with an armed robber. The irony tasted like bitter bile in the back of my throat. I crossed the threshold and was immediately hit by a wave of pure sensory shock. The house didn't smell like home anymore. For 40 years, this place carried a warm, comforting aroma, lemon oil, pine, and the rich spices coretta, used for cooking, like paprika, garlic, and thyme. Now, the air was heavy with a suffocating, sickeningly sweet artificial fragrance. Vanilla mixed with a sharp, musky perfume. I looked around. Candles were burning everywhere. Expensive designer jars lined the mantel, the side tables, and the dining room console. It was overwhelming. It smelled like a funeral home or a cheap boutique trying too hard. I walked into the living room and my jaw tightened. The furniture had been completely rearranged. My favorite leather recliner, the one perfectly broken in to support my bad back, was gone. In its place stood a sleek, beige accent chair that looked like it would snap if a full-grown adult actually sat in it. Tyrell was sprawled out on the main sofa, his feet propped up on the coffee table. He was wearing a sports jersey that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. He didn't even look up when I walked in. His eyes remained locked on the 85-inch television screen, watching a bunch of millionaires chase a ball. "Hey, Dad," he mumbled, taking a bite of pizza. "You're back." I stood there, leaning heavily on my cane, waiting for him to stand up. Waiting for him to offer me a seat, to ask about my surgery, to act like a son. He didn't move. "Where's my chair?" I asked. Paige brushed past me, leaving a trail of expensive perfume behind. "Oh, that old thing?" We dragged it to the curb for heavy trash pickup. It was an eyesore, Langston. The leather was cracked, and it completely ruined the aesthetic of the room. "We're trying to modernize the space, give it some feng shui." "You threw away my chair?" I repeated. "It smelled like motor oil and old man," Paige said, taking another sip of her wine. "Besides, you barely come down here anyway. You just sleep in it." It was depressing to look at. I looked at Tyrell. He finally tore his eyes away from the screen for a second, but he couldn't face me. He stared at a spot on the wall just past my shoulder. Paige has a great eye, Dad, he said defensively. The place looks way better. It adds equity. I was too drained to fight over furniture, too exhausted to scream. My body was shutting down. I needed to lie down immediately, or I was going to collapse right onto their modern beige rug. I'm going to my room, I said, turning toward the stairs. I need to rest. Paige cleared her throat. It was a sharp, grating sound that made me freeze. She stepped in front of the staircase, a predatory look of satisfactions gleaming in her eyes, barely concealed. About that, she said. I stopped. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. About what? We made a few adjustments while you were in the hospital, she said, examining her manicured nails. Since you were gone, and we didn't know when, or if, you'd be coming back, we decided to repurpose the master bedroom. Repurpose it? I whispered. That was my room. That was the room where I held Coretta as she took her last breath. The room where we brought Tyrell home. It was my sanctuary. It has the best natural light, Paige explained, completely unfazed. And since I'm launching my yoga and wellness channel, I needed a proper studio space. We moved the bed out, painted the walls a soothing sage green, and installed full-length mirrors. It's beautiful, Langston. You should be happy. It's actually being used for something productive now. I looked back at Tyrell. He shoved himself deeper into the sofa cushions and turned up the volume on the game, using the roaring stadium crowd to drown out his own shame. You kicked me out of my own bedroom? I said, my voice rising as anger cut through the physical pain. Where am I supposed to sleep? Paige pointed a manicured finger toward the kitchen door, the one leading down to the basement. The downstairs suite is completely open, she said. It's private, quiet. Honestly, it's better for everyone. With your heart condition, you shouldn't be climbing stairs anyway. And we won't have to listen to you coughing all night. It's a win-win. The basement. It was finished, but it was damp. The only light came from a few small windows near the ceiling. It was freezing in the winter and humid in the summer. It was where we stored Christmas decorations and old winter coats. It wasn't a room for the head of the house. It was a room for an afterthought. You put my things in the basement? I asked, feeling the heat rise in my face. We brought your clothes and your nightstand down, Paige said. The bed was too bulky for the tight staircase, so we set up a premium air mattress down there for now. It's really comfortable, top of the line, an air mattress. I looked at them, my coward of a son, my usurper of a daughter-in-law. Standing in my house, drinking my wine, watching my TV, telling me to go down into the cellar and sleep on a balloon. Ooh! My hand tightened around my cane. I wanted to swing it. I wanted to smash those expensive candles, break the TV screen, tear down those sage green walls. But then, I felt the crinkle of the paper in my shirt pocket. The lottery ticket. $80 million. If I blew up now, if I tried to throw them out tonight, they would fight me. They would claim tenancy rights. They would drag me into court. In my physical condition, the stress would end me before I ever saw a dime. No, I had to be smarter. I had to play it cool. I took a deep breath, forcing the fire in my chest down, and managed to squeeze out a tight, painful smile. You're right, I said. The stairs are too much. The basement is better. Paige blinked, caught off guard. She had been expecting a massive fight. She had her claws out, ready to scratch. But I had given her nothing to lean into. She looked almost disappointed. Good, she said, sniffing. I'm glad you're being reasonable for once. If you're hungry, there are leftovers in the fridge. We already ate. I walked past them, navigating the kitchen filled with their dirty dishes. I opened the basement door, and a rush of musty, cold air greeted me. It smelled like mildew and neglect. I made my way down the steep wooden steps one by one, gripping the handrail like my life depended on it. My legs shook so violently, I almost lost my footing twice. When I reached the bottom, I pulled the string on the single overhead bulb. The room was bleak. My clothes were stuffed into trash bags piled in a corner. My nightstand was there, scratched up from being dragged down the stairs. And in the middle of the bare concrete floor sat a deflated air mattress with a thin blanket tossed carelessly over it. This was my homecoming. I sat on the edge of the mattress, which sank almost to the floor under my weight. I was 70 years old. I had worked since I was 12, and this was what I got. I didn't eat. I took my pain medication with some lukewarm water from the bathroom sink down the hall. I lay down on the plastic mattress, staring up at the unfinished ceiling, listening to the muffled thud of their footsteps upstairs and the low drone of the TV. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. The pain was too intense, and my mind was racing. Hours passed. The house grew quiet. The TV clicked off. I heard them walking above me, moving into what used to be my bedroom. The floorboards creaked. I knew exactly where they were standing. I lay in the dark, listening. The ventilation system in this old house was a direct acoustic link. The vents carried sound like a telephone wire, especially from the master bedroom down to the basement utility closet, which sat right behind a thin layer of drywall near my head. I heard their voices, clear as day. I can't believe he actually went down there without a fight. Paige's voice floated down through the vent. I thought he was going to have a stroke right there in the living room. He's weak, Terrell replied. He looked terrible, Paige. Gray, like a ghost. Good, Paige snapped. The sooner he realizes he can't handle living here, the better. Did you call the lawyer? Yeah, Terrell said. I left a message. We need to move fast, Terrell. We can't let him linger down there for years. It's depressing. And I am not changing his filters or checking on his medication when he gets worse. He's just recovering from surgery, Paige. He's not invalid. Not yet, she hissed. But he's old, and his heart is a ticking clock. Listen, I was looking at assisted living facilities today. You mean a nursing home? Whatever you want to call it. There's one just over the state line. It's state-funded. Cheap. It smells like bleach and boiled cabbage, but they'll take him on Medicaid. We just need to show he can't care for himself anymore. How do we prove that? We document it. He's confused. He's aggressive. He falls. If we report that he's a danger to himself, the state will step in. We get power of attorney, Tyrell. Once we have that, we can list this place. It's not a bad house, Tyrell muttered. It's older, sure, but the lot alone is worth a fortune. We sell the house, put him in the facility, and use the cash to buy that condo downtown. The one with the rooftop pool. That's what I actually deserve. I lay rigid in the dark, my breath catching in my throat. They weren't just being cruel. They were plotting. They were planning to erase me, warehousing me in some cheap facility, just so they could liquidate my life's work for a condo with a pool. I reached up, pressing my hand over the lottery ticket in my shirt pocket. A state-funded facility. Boiled cabbage. I closed my eyes, and a single tear slipped down into my ear. All right, Terrell said softly. All right, we'll start the paperwork next week. Let him heal up a bit first so it doesn't look suspicious. Next week, Paige agreed. Good night, babe. The house fell completely silent again, a heavy, tomb-like quiet. But in the darkness of the basement, my eyes snapped open. The sadness was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Any remaining trace of affection for my son was burned to ash. Next week, they thought they had time. They thought they were the hunters, and I was the prey. I sat up on the deflated fots. My chest throbbed, but I didn't care anymore. I reached into my bag, pulled out Coretta's picture, and kissed her smiling face. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I whispered into the dark. I tried. I really tried with him. But you can't save something that's rotten to the core. I put the photo away and pulled out the lottery ticket. $80 million. They wanted to flip this house for a quick payday. They wanted to discard me for a fraction of that wealth. That's when I realized that simply leaving wasn't enough. Walking away with the money was too easy on them. It was too merciful. No, I was going to give them exactly what they wanted. I was going to build them up, letting them think they had won everything. And then, when they were standing at the absolute top, I was going to pull the floor right out from under their feet. I checked my watch. It was 3 a.m. I had work to do. I needed a lawyer, a specific one. An old friend from the neighborhood named Steinberg. He could be as slick as a politician when needed, but he was fiercely loyal to his friends. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text. Steinberg, I need you. Big case. Life and death. Meet me at the diner on 4th at 6 Belt a.m. I lay back down, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, mapping out the house deed in my mind, visualizing the look on Paige's face when the final hammer dropped. Let them sleep in the master bedroom tonight. Let them dream of condos and swimming pools. Because tomorrow, the old man in the basement was going to light a fuse. And, by the time I was done, their grand illusions would be nothing but smoke. The aroma of garlic butter and searing beef drifted down through the floorboards, hitting me like a physical slap in the face. I sat on the edge of the deflated air mattress in the damp basement, clutching a stale piece of white bread I had found in the back of the pantry. My dinner was that dry slice and a glass of lukewarm water from the bathroom tap. My stomach rumbled, a low, hollow sound that echoed in the empty space. Upstairs, a feast was underway. I could hear the heavy clink of silver against porcelain. They were using Coretta's good china, the plates with the gold rim that she only brought out for Thanksgiving and Christmas. On a random Tuesday night, they were cutting steaks on my Ursuf's prize dishes while I withered in the cellar like discarded trash. I took a bite of the bread. It stuck to the roof of my mouth, dry and tasteless. I forced myself to swallow, feeling it pass the hard knot of anger in my throat. I wasn't just hungry for food. I was starving for respect. But tonight, humiliation was the only thing on the menu. I heard Tyrell laugh, a deep, booming sound, the kind he used to make when we were working on cars together. Now he was laughing at something, Paige said. Her voice, sharp and animated, cut through the floorboards. They were celebrating their future, toasting to a stolen bedroom and a planned condo, celebrating a life without me. The basement chill seeped into my bones, making my surgical scar ache with a dull throbbing. I finished the bread, drank the water, and stared at the gray concrete wall. I was the man who laid the foundation of this house, and now I was a prisoner beneath it. Suddenly, the volume on the 85-inch TV upstairs surged. The floor vibrated with the sound. I recognized the familiar theme music of the 6 p.m. evening news. I tried to find a comfortable position on the mattress, my ears straining toward the ceiling. Then, the anchor's voice boomed through the thin floor. Tonight, a local hero, a 70-year-old man, recovering from recent open-heart surgery, fought off an armed robber at a convenience store on the east side. I froze. My heart began to pound against my ribs. Upstairs, the clinking of forks and knives stopped instantly. The dining room went dead silent. Then Tyrell shouted, "Babe, look! It's Dad!" I waited. For a fraction of a second, a foolish part of me wondered if he would be proud. I waited for my son to say, "That's my dad. That's the man who raised me." Instead, Paige let out a loud, screeching laugh. It was a cruel, high-pitched sound. Look at him. He looks like a vagrant, swinging a stick around. Oh my God, Tyrell. He's embarrassing us on local TV. Look at his hair. He looks unhinged. Tyrell joined in, laughing along with the mockery. He really does look wild. I hope nobody associates the name. Can you imagine the guys at the gym seeing this? My dad, the senior citizen vigilante. They were laughing at a man who had survived a lethal threat. They were mocking my survival. My heart turned to stone. The last remaining ember of affection I had for them died right there in the dark. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted them to be quiet. Then, the news anchor shifted topics. In an incredible twist of fate, the single winning ticket for the Powerball jackpot was sold this afternoon at that very same convenience store on MLK Boulevard. The jackpot stands at a staggering $80 million. My hand flew to my breast pocket. The ticket was right there, warm against my skin, resting next to my scar. I pulled it out. The basement was dark, but a sliver of light from the street lamp cut through the high, narrow window. It was enough. I squinted at the paper, my hands shaking, not from age, but from the immense weight of the moment. 4/12/1985, 7. I stopped breathing. The air left the room entirely. I looked again. The numbers matched perfectly. It was black and white. I had the ticket. I had $80 million. Upstairs, the anchor continued, "Check your pockets, folks. If you bought a ticket at Al's Market between 2 COD and 3 p.m. today, you might be wealthier than you ever imagined." The silence from upstairs was sudden and absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating quiet, the kind that falls right before a storm hits. Then, a chair screeched violently against the hardwood floor. Paige shrieked. The mockery was gone from her voice, replaced by a frantic, unhinged greed. "Your dad was there. He was there. At 2:30. The news said he was buying water and aspirin." Tyrell's heavy footsteps thudded across the floor as he began to pace. "No way. Dad never buys lottery tickets. Mom did, but he doesn't. He always called it a tax on people who can't do math." "He's old, Tyrell," Paige shouted. "Old people do things their dead wives used to do. He misses her. What if he played her numbers? What if he bought a ticket?" I sat in the dark, gripping $80 million, listening to my son and his wife hyperventilate over money they thought belonged to them. I heard them running around the rooms upstairs, opening drawers, tearing things apart. They were looking for something. They were looking for proof. A massive realization washed over me, making the air in the basement feel thin. I knew my son, and I knew his weakness. I knew Paige, and I knew her ambition. If they came down here right now and found this ticket, I wouldn't make it out of this house. They wouldn't wait for a nursing home. They wouldn't wait for the state to declare me incapacitated. $80 million is enough motivation to turn a bad son into something far worse. They would use a pillow or stage an accident and just claim my heart gave out. I had to move. The pain in my chest was completely forgotten. Adrenaline surged through my veins, cold and sharp. I folded the ticket into a tiny square and shoved it deep into my sock, pressing it flat against my ankle bone. I grabbed my small plastic bag of hospital items and slipped Coretta's photo inside. I reached into a rusty old toolbox they never touched because it was too dirty for their liking, and pulled out the original deed to the house. I stuffed that in, too. Upstairs, the shouting was escalating. "Go ask him!" Paige screamed. "Go down there and search his pockets!" "I'm not going down there!" Tyrell yelled back. "You go!" "He's not right in the head. He might swing that cane at me. We need to know." Paige gasped, her voice desperate. $80 million, Tyrell. Do you know what we could do with that? We could buy the whole building, not just a condo. Go down there." While they were yelling at each other over who should come down to interrogate me, I made my way toward the basement's back exit. The bulkhead doors that led to the backyard. The heavy steel was rusted and stiff from years of disuse. I grit my teeth and threw my weight against it. My chest screamed in protest, the stitches pulling tight against my skin. I ignored the pain and pushed harder. The rusty hinges gave a low, grinding screech, but the sound was completely swallowed by the crash of Paige throwing her wine glass against the wall upstairs. The doors gave way, and I slipped out, seat, into the cool night air, the morning dew soaking into my ankles. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look at the warm glow of the kitchen window, where my family was plotting to strip me bare. I limped across the backyard, past the overgrown garden Coretta used to tend, and disappeared into the dark alley. I was leaving my home behind, walking from the life I spent 40 years building. But I was taking my dignity with me, and $80 million. I walked out into the streets, pushing through the pain, step by step. I stayed hidden in the shadows until the house became nothing more than a faint blur behind me. I was a ghost now, a wealthy ghost with a plan for justice, and they wouldn't see me again until their world came crashing down around them. The lobby of the Grand Ellington Hotel was lined with polished marble, so clean it reflected my worn-out sneakers. I walked up to the front desk, tightly clutching that little plastic hospital bag, looking like someone who had just drifted in from the cold. The concierge was a young man with a stiff collar and an equally stiff expression, looking me up and down. His eyes lingered on my rumpled clothes and my cane. I could tell he was getting ready to politely show me the door. Before he could say a word, I reached into my wallet and slapped my black credit card onto the counter. It was the one card I kept hidden from Tyrell, a remnant from the days when I ran my own shop and my credit was spotless. "I want the penthouse suite," I said, my voice rough but leaving no room for argument. "For a week, and send up a bottle of your finest bourbon. Not to drink, just to look at." The clerk's attitude flipped instantly. A polished, professional smile masked his face. "Of course, Mr. Bennett. Right away, sir." 10 minutes later, I was standing in a room larger than the entire first floor of my house, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. The bed looked like a cloud of white linen, and the bathtub was deep enough to swim in. I sat on the edge of the mattress, feeling a true sense of relief for the first time in 4 days. The air here didn't smell like dampness or cheap vanilla candles. It smelled like lavender and luxury. I took a long, hot shower, letting the steam wash away the memory of that cold basement. I washed off the grime of the alley. When I stepped out, I wrapped myself in a plush bathrobe that felt like a warm embrace. Sitting in a velvet armchair by the window, I finally turned my phone back on. The phone buzzed so violently against the glass table it sounded like a drill. The screen lit up with a chaotic flood of notifications. 99 missed calls and 57 text messages. Their panic was deeply satisfying. I opened the messages. Tyrell wrote, "Dad, where are you? We're so worried. Please pick up." Then, we saw the news. "Is it true? Do you have the ticket?" Paige texted, "Dad, please come home. The basement was just temporary until we got the guest room ready. We love you." And then, "We're family, Langston. Don't let outsiders get between us. Call us back right now." I scrolled through the fabrications. Just hours ago, I was a burden, a coughing old man to be hidden away. Now, I was dad, I was loved, I was family. The hypocrisy was sickening. They weren't worried about my heart. They were terrified that $80 million was roaming the city outside their control. They were terrified I might pass away before signing a check. I didn't reply. I let them sweat. Let them stare at that empty basement and wonder if their golden goose had flown away for good. I ordered a ribeye steak from room service, medium rare, with asparagus. I ate slowly, savoring every bite with heavy silver utensils. I was no cellar prisoner. I was Langston Bennett, and I was preparing for a reckoning. The next morning, I met Steinberg at a diner 3 blocks from the hotel. Steinberg was a 75-year-old attorney who had been practicing law since before the Civil Rights Act was fully established. He wore a suit that was 20 years out of style, complete with a mustard stain on his tie, but his eyes were sharp as a razor. We had known each other for 30 years. He helped me with my property deeds, and I fixed his Cadillacs, more times than I could count. He slid into the booth across from me and gestured to the waitress for coffee, without a word. "You look terrible, Langston," he grunted. "I hear you just had heart surgery, and now you're running around fighting robbers and winning the lottery. Are you trying to kill yourself?" I pulled the folded lottery ticket from my sock and slid it across the table under the cover of a napkin. "Check the numbers, Steinberg. Tell me I'm not dreaming." Steinberg lifted the napkin and peered underneath. He adjusted his thick glasses, looked at the ticket, and pulled out his phone to check the winning numbers. He froze completely, then looked up at me and let out a long, low whistle. "80 million, he whispered. "Congratulations, my old friend. You practically own half the city now. But why do you look like you're at a funeral?" "Because my son would betray me for this," I said. I told him everything. The hospital texts, the changed locks, the basement. The conversation I overheard about the facility and their plan to declare me incompetent. Steinberg listened, his face hardening into a mask of cold anger. He despised abusers, and he loathed ungrateful children even more. "If you cash this ticket today, Langston, you lose," Steinberg said, tapping his knuckles against the table. "What do you mean? It's my ticket. It is your ticket. But you are a man recovering from major surgery who was just involved in a violent incident. If you claim this money, Tyrell and his wife will file for emergency conservatorship. They'll argue the anesthesia clouded your judgment. They'll say the trauma left you mentally unstable. They'll find some unscrupulous doctor to testify that you can't manage your affairs. A judge could freeze the assets during an investigation, and, while that plays out, you might suffer a very unfortunate accident on those basement stairs. Do you understand me? A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. They would use the legal system to trap me. So, what do we do? I asked. We set a trap, Steinberg said, a devious smile spreading across his face. We make them believe you are exactly what they claim. Confused, frail, and forgetful. We make them think the ticket is lost, or that you're too disoriented to claim it. Why? Because greedy people make mistakes when they think they've already won, Steinberg explained. We need to isolate your assets before the money ever hits your account. We need them to willingly sign over their rights to your estate. How on earth do I get them to sign something like that? We set up a trust, Steinberg said. The Bennett family trust. I'll draft the paperwork. We tell them that to avoid a massive estate tax, which is a lie, but they're too foolish to know any better. We need to consolidate all family assets into this trust before the lottery funds are deposited. We tell them the trust requires the deed to the house and any other assets to be transferred back to you as the grantor to trigger the tax loophole. To get their hands on that $80 million, they'll sign anything, I realized. For that kind of money, they would hand over their very souls. Steinberg chuckled. They'll think it's just a formality, a paperwork game. But once they sign the quitclaim deed for the house and the waiver of trust benefits, they legally own nothing. The trust will be unilaterally revocable by you. As soon as the funds clear, we evict them. It was brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely perfect. Draft the papers, I said. One more thing, Steinberg warned. You have to play the part, Langston. You have to go back there and be the confused old man they want to see. You have to endure their treatment for a few more days. Can you handle that? Can you swallow your pride? I thought of the damp basement and the deflated air mattress. I can do it, I said. Good. Go to the bank. Put the ticket in a safety deposit box. Don't walk around with $80 million in your sock. Make a copy first. A bad one, slightly blurry. Use that as your prop. And Langston, be careful. Those people aren't your family anymore. They are sharks, and you are swimming in their tank. I left the diner and went straight to First National Bank, renting a safety deposit box. I placed the ticket inside the metal drawer. It looked like a regular piece of paper, but it felt as heavy as a gold brick. I locked it away. Then I went to the hotel's business center and made a photocopy of the ticket. I crumpled it up, smoothed it back out, and stained the corner with a bit of coffee. It looked weathered, like a piece of paper, forgotten in a pocket for too long. Back in my room, I stood in front of the full-length mirror, looking at my reflection. I looked too strong. I slumped my shoulders, relaxed my jaw, and let my eyes go wide and vacant. I practiced making my right hand tremble. Where's my ticket? I muttered to the mirror, my voice turning into a confused whine. I just had it right here. Did I lose it? I practiced until I almost believed it myself. I practiced until the capable mechanic vanished, replaced by a fragile, disoriented old man who looked like he needed help just to tie his shoes. I was ready. I packed my bag and checked out. Taking a deep breath, I let the premium air fill my lungs one last time. I was going back to the house on MLK Boulevard. I was going back to the basement, but this time I wasn't the victim. I was the director of this tragedy, and Tyrell and Paige had no idea they had been cast as the fools. I walked to the taxi stand and gave the driver my address. Showtime, I whispered to myself. The cab pulled up to the house, and before the wheels even came to a stop, the front door flew open. Tyrell sprinted down the driveway like he was trying to catch a game-winning pass. He was wearing a brand-new polo shirt and khakis, looking like the picture-perfect devoted son. Paige followed right behind, standing on the porch with a smile so wide it looked painted on. Sitting in the back seat, I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump forward, relaxed my jaw to let my mouth hang slightly open, and let my hands begin to shake. The strong man who fought off a robber was gone. In his place was a fragile, disoriented elder returning home. Ali, the cab driver, looked back at me, thoroughly confused by my sudden transformation. I gave him a quick wink before Tyrell yanked the door open. "Dad!" Tyrell cried out, his voice cracking with an overacted sense of relief that deserved an Oscar. "Oh, thank God. We were worried sick. Where did you go? Why didn't you pick up?" I blinked at him slowly, keeping my gaze unfocused. "Tyrell," I rasped, my voice barely a whisper. "Is that you, son? I got lost. The city is so big." Tyrell reached in and unbuckled my seatbelt, his movements gentle, almost reverent. This was the same man who told me to call an Uber yesterday because of a tied game. Now, he treated me like fragile porcelain. "I've got you, Dad. I've got you. Let me help you up." He practically lifted me out of the car. I leaned my full weight into him, making him grunt under the load. I wanted him to feel the heavy burden of the father he had tried to discard. Paige hurried down the steps, leaving her wineglass behind this time. Her hands were wringing together, and her eyes scanned me up and down, searching for one thing. The ticket. "Langston," she purred. "You poor thing, you must be exhausted. Come inside." We made breakfast, a huge feast. They guided me into the house, and the scent hit me instantly. It wasn't the suffocating vanilla from yesterday. It was bacon, thick-cut, hickory-smoked bacon, buttered eggs, warm biscuits, and fresh coffee. It smelled like Saturday mornings when Coretta was still alive. They were pulling out all the stops. They seated me at the head of the dining table. The good china was out again, but this time it was set for me. The table was piled high with food, scrambled eggs, sausage, grits swimming in butter, and a stack of pancakes. I looked at the food, then at them. They hovered over me, watching with hungry eyes. "Eat up, Dad," Tyrell urged, sliding a glass of orange juice closer to my hand. "You need to get your strength back. The medication made you weak." I reached for the glass, purposely letting my hand shake violently. Juice splashed over the rim, staining the pristine white tablecloth. "Oh dear," I mumbled. "I'm sorry. My hands, they won't steady." "No problem at all," Paige said cheerfully, grabbing a napkin to dab at the spill. "Don't worry about it, Langston. We'll clean it up. Just eat." Then, she did something that almost broke my composure. She looked at my sneakers, which were old, worn, and scuffed from the alley. "Oh, Tyrell, look at his feet," she said. "He's still in those dirty shoes. He must be so uncomfortable." Tyrell immediately dropped to one knee without hesitation. He knelt on the hardwood floor at my feet and began untying my laces. "Let me get these off for you, Dad," he said. "You need to relax." I looked down at the crown of my son's head. I remembered changing his diapers and tying his shoes before his first Little League game. Now, he knelt there, not out of love, but out of a desperate greed that had stripped him of his dignity. He gently removed my shoes and pulled off my socks. I held my breath. The copy of the ticket was in my pocket, not my sock. But the feeling of his hands on my feet was a stark reminder of how the power dynamic had shifted. Yesterday, I was garbage. Today, I was the golden calf, I ate slowly, chewing each bite with agonizing deliberation. I could feel the tension radiating off them as they watched. They were bursting to ask the question. The $80 million question. Finally, Paige couldn't take it anymore. She sat down beside me and poured herself a coffee, her hand trembling slightly. "So Langston," she began, her voice tight and high, "we saw the news last night about the robbery." I stopped chewing and stared at a piece of bacon. "The robbery," I muttered. "Yes, bad men." Very loud. "You were so brave," Terrell chimed in, still sitting on the floor by my feet. "A hero, Dad. Everyone is talking about it." I nodded slowly. "I just wanted some water." Paige leaned closer, her perfume overwhelming. "The report mentioned something else, Langston. They said the winning Powerball ticket was sold at that very store, right around the time you were there." The room went dead silent. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen and the sound of Tyrell holding his breath. "The ticket," I repeated, as if testing an unfamiliar word. "Yes, Dad," Tyrell said, rising to his knees. "The ticket. Did you buy one? Mom's numbers. Remember?" I knit my brows, contorting my face into an expression of painful confusion, as if trying to solve a complex math problem. "Coretta," I whispered. "Yes, I missed her. I wanted to play her numbers." Paige gasped. "So you did buy one? You have a ticket?" I nodded. "I think so." "Yes," the machine made a sound. "Where is it, Langston?" Paige asked quickly, her eyes wide with a manic intensity. "Where is the ticket?" I patted my chest pocket, then my pants pockets. I looked around the table, then started checking the floor. "It was right here," I said, panic rising in my voice. A little white piece of paper. I had it. "Did you put it in your wallet?" Terrell asked, grabbing my jacket from the back of the chair to search the pockets. "No, no." I waved my hand. I took it out. I looked at it. "And then what?" Paige pressed, gripping the edge of the table. "My head hurts," I complained, rubbing my temples. "The doctor said the anesthesia causes memory loss." I'm confused. The man with the gun came in. I was scared. "What did you do with the paper, Dad?" Terrell's voice was strained, fighting the urge to shout. I think I threw it away," I said. The blood drained from Paige's face so fast I thought she might faint. Terrell looked like he had been punched hard in the stomach. "You threw it away?" Paige whispered, her voice failing her. "I crumpled it up," I said, looking at my hands. "I thought it was a receipt or a wrapper. I tossed it in a bin outside the hotel, or maybe in the cab. I don't remember. Why does it matter?" Terrell let out a sound like a wounded animal, burying his face in his hands. Paige slammed her hands on the table, her chair scraping back hard. "Which hotel?" she demanded. "Which cab? What company?" "I don't know," I wailed, letting my voice crack. "Why are you yelling at me? I just want to finish my eggs." "I'm not yelling," Paige hissed through gritted teeth, forcing a terrifyingly fake smile. "I'm just asking. Think, Langston. Think carefully. Did you leave it in a pocket? Maybe. A different pocket." I searched myself again, pulling out lint, a used tissue, and finally, the crumpled photocopy I had prepared at the hotel. The one with the coffee stain and the blurry numbers. "Oh, here's a piece of paper," I said, holding it up. "But it's just trash. Look, it's all ruined." I made a move to toss it onto the table, but Tyrell lunged forward like a starving dog snapping at a bone, snatching it from my hand. He smoothed it out against the tablecloth as Paige hovered over his shoulder. I watched their eyes track across the faded ink. 4, 12, 19, 85, 7. Oh my God, Paige breathed. Oh my God, Tyrell. This is it. This is the ticket. Tyrell looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. It looks a little strange, he said. It feels like regular paper, and it's heavily creased. I spilled coffee on it at the hotel, I said innocently. Is that a ticket? Did I win $10? $10? Paige let out a hysterical, bubbling laugh. You won $80 million, Langston. 80 million? I dropped my fork, letting my jaw drop. 80 million? I repeated. That's a lot of money. We can finally fix the roof. We can buy 1,000 roofs, Tyrell shouted, grabbing my face and kissing my forehead. Dad, you're a genius. You're a millionaire. We're millionaires. I thought. The truth finally comes out. Wait, Paige said, snatching the copy from Tyrell's hands. This is barely legible, and it's completely wrinkled. We have to be careful. If the barcode is damaged, they might not honor it. Where is the original, Langston? Is this the only one? I think so, I said, rubbing my eyes. My head is pounding. I need to lie down. No. You can't lie down, Paige said. We need to find the original. Is this the original or a copy? It feels like plain paper. I closed my eyes and swayed slightly in the chair. I'm dizzy, I groaned. My heart, Tyrell looked at Paige. Let him rest, babe. We have the numbers. Even if this is a copy, he must have the original somewhere. Maybe in his bag or another pair of pants. Paige looked at the paper, then at me, weighing the risk of pushing me too hard against the risk of losing the fortune. Fine, she said. Fine, Dad. Go rest. We'll take care of you. We'll figure everything out. Tyrell, help him to the living room sofa. Don't go down to the basement. I let Tyrell support me over to the comfortable sofa, the one he had monopolized for years. I sat down with a groan and lifted my legs. My feet, I complained. They're swelling up again. The doctor said, I need to keep the circulation moving. Tyrell hovered nearby, looking lost. Rub them, I said, pointing to my swollen ankles. What? Tyrell asked. My feet, I repeated. Rub them. The doctor said, massage is good for the heart, unless you want me to have another episode right here on the couch. Tyrell looked at Paige, who nodded sharply, mouthing the words, 80 million. Tyrell sighed, sat on the coffee table, and took my dry, calloused foot into his lap, beginning to rub. Harder, I commanded. The ache is deep in the bone. My son, the man who thought he was too good to work, who believed manual labor was beneath him, began massaging my feet with the desperation of a man trying to earn his way into a fortune. I leaned back and closed my eyes, hiding the flash of victory in my expression. Paige, I called out. Yes, Langston, she answered from the kitchen, where she was frantically tearing through my hospital bags. I'm hungry again, I said. But I don't want eggs. I want soup. Coretta's soup, the Southern-style chicken stew with homemade dumplings. It takes about 4 hours to make properly. Celery chopped very fine, and the chicken shredded by hand. I heard Paige freeze. I knew she hated cooking, and she absolutely detested handling raw meat, always opting for pre-cut vegetables or takeout. Langston, that takes all day, she said, her voice tight. It brings me comfort, I said, letting my voice tremble. It makes me feel safe. And when I feel safe, my memory works better. Maybe I'll remember where I put the original documents. The bait was set. I'll get started right away, she said, slamming a cabinet door shut. I sat back on the plush sofa, enjoying a foot massage from my son, while my daughter-in-law chopped onions in the kitchen, muttering curses under her breath. I watched the dust motes dance in the sunlight filtering through the window, thinking back to the basement and the air mattress. "A little to the left, Tyrell," I said, keeping my eyes closed. "Use both hands. Don't slack off." They wanted the money. They wanted the power. Well, they were going to have to work for it. They were going to serve the man they tried to bury. And when they were completely exhausted, when they had given me everything they had left, I would show them exactly what their service was worth. Nothing. The chicken stew was a little too salty, and the dumplings were slightly doughy, but I ate every bite. All the while, Paige watched me like a hawk hovering over a field mouse. I wiped my mouth with a linen napkin and let out a long, exhausted sigh. My gaze drifted toward the built-in bookshelves on the far wall. That was Coretta's library. She had spent 40 years collecting first edition mystery novels and historical books. It was her sanctuary. And since she passed, it had gathered nothing but dust because Tyrell and Paige never looked at anything that wasn't on a phone screen. "You know," I said, my voice shaking with perfect dramatic timing, "I think I might have slipped that original paper inside one of the books." The silence in the room broke instantly. The dish towel slipped from Paige's hand and hit the floor. Tyrell's hands froze on my left foot. "A book?" Tyrell asked, his eyes darting to the hundreds of volumes lining the wall. "Which book, Dad?" I rubbed my temples, wincing as if the mental effort was physically painful. "I don't know, son. I'm so confused. The doctor said the anesthesia ruins short-term memory. I just remember opening a book. Maybe it was blue. Maybe it was red. I wanted to keep it flat, like pressing a flower." Paige was already moving. She marched into the study, a mix of greed and exhaustion in her eyes as she scanned the shelves, which held at least 500 books. "All right," she snapped, clicking her fingers at Tyrell. "Stop sitting there rubbing his feet. Start looking." "What about Dad?" Tyrell asked. "He's fine," Paige hissed. He finished his soup. "Get up, Tyrell. We need to find that ticket." I sat comfortably on the sofa, watching my son and his wife descend upon my late wife's legacy like a swarm of locusts. At first, they were careful. They pulled the books out one by one, gently shaking the spines, hoping a slip of paper would flutter out. They checked the blue books first, then the red ones. Nothing. "Check everything," Paige ordered, her voice rising an octave. He said he was confused. It could be in any of them. Care went out the window, replaced by pure desperation. Tyrell began grabbing handfuls of paperbacks, ripping them from the shelves and aggressively tearing through the pages. Books hit the floor with heavy thuds. Dust swirled into the air, creating a haze in the afternoon sun. I watched Paige grab a vintage copy of The Invisible Man, a book Coretta had cherished. She shook it violently, and when nothing fell out, she tossed it into a pile of discarded volumes, the cover creasing under the impact. My chest tightened, but I kept my face blank. They were destroying the physical memories left in this house, but I reminded myself they had already destroyed its soul long ago. "Hurry up," Paige coughed, waving away the cloud of dust. "It has to be in here." I stood up, letting my knees shake just enough to maintain the illusion. "I'm exhausted," I mumbled, leaning heavily on my cane. "I think I'll go back to the basement now." "Oh, absolutely, Dad," Tyrell said, steering me toward the kitchen door with an arm around my shoulder that felt entirely artificial. "Go get some rest. You've earned it. Paige and I have plenty of packing to do anyway." "Sleep well, Langston," Paige added, her voice overflowing with a sickly sweetness as she clutched the photocopy of the lottery ticket like a security blanket. "We'll have a nice breakfast ready for you in the morning before you leave for the bank." I descended the steep wooden steps into the darkness. But as soon as the door clicked shut behind me, the frailty vanished from my posture. I stood tall in the chilly basement air, a deep, silent laugh shaking my chest. Upstairs, the celebration erupted. I could hear the thud of heavy boxes being dragged across the hardwood, the tearing of packing tape, and the muffled shouts of their excitement. They were already packing up their lives, ready to abandon this house the second the clock struck midnight on my ownership. They thought they were packing for a mansion in Malibu. They had no idea they were preparing for their own eviction. I sat on the edge of the air mattress, pulling the true black wallet from my pocket. I extracted the tiny metal key to the safety deposit box at First National Bank. I held it up to the single light bulb, watching it glint. $80 million was safely locked away under my signature alone, and the house deed was back where it belonged. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. The adrenaline kept me warm, drowning out the damp chill of the concrete floor. I spent the hours listening to the sounds of my family, dismantling their presence from my home, room by room, driven by a frantic, blind avarice. At 8:30 a.m., the thud of a heavy car door outside broke the silence of the morning. I stood up, smoothed down my rumpled jacket, and allowed the frail, shaking persona to settle over my limbs one last time. I limped up the stairs and into the kitchen. Tyrell and Paige were already waiting by the front door, surrounded by stacked cardboard boxes. They looked exhausted, but wired, bags under their eyes from a night spent counting unhatched chickens. "Steinberg is here," Tyrell said, checking his phone nervously. He just texted. "You ready, Dad?" "I'm ready," I rasped, letting my right hand tremble as I reached for the door handle. Paige stepped forward, adjusting my collar with a terrifying mimicry of affection. "Make sure you sign exactly where the lawyer tells you, Langston. Don't lose that paper." "I won't," I murmured. I walked down the driveway toward Steinberg's sleek, black sedan. He was standing by the passenger door, looking as imposing and professional as he had the day before. He opened the door for me, his face an unreadable mask of legal gravity. "Morning, Langston," he said clearly, loud enough for Tyrell and Paige to hear from the porch. "Let's go secure your family's future." I climbed into the plush leather seat, and Steinberg shut the door. As he walked around to the driver's side and got in, the tension in my shoulders finally melted away. He shifted the car into drive and pulled away from the curb. We drove in silence for 2 blocks before Steinberg looked over at me, a sharp, knowing grin breaking across his weathered face. "You played them beautifully, old friend." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I checked the registry first thing this morning. The quitclaim deed is officially recorded. The house belongs solely to you. The waiver of trust benefits is ironclad. They legally have zero claim to a single penny of your wealth or your property." "Let's go get the real ticket," I said, my voice steady, firm, and completely devoid of the weakness I had faked for 24 hours. We stopped at First National Bank first. The vault manager escorted us into the secure room, and I turned the key in box number 4112. Pulling out the metal drawer, I retrieved the genuine, unblemished Powerball ticket. Holding it in my hands, looking at Coretta's numbers printed perfectly on the crisp paper, a tear finally escaped my eye. "We did it, Coretta," I whispered. "They'll never tarnish your memory again." From the bank, we drove straight to the state lottery headquarters. The process was a blur of paperwork, security checks, and formal verifications. Because of the trust structure Steinberg had expertly established prior to our arrival, the funds were cleared for an immediate wire transfer into a private, high-yield account under my sole name, completely shielded from public disclosure or third-party interference. By 1 p.m., the transaction was complete. I was a multi-millionaire, and legally, I was completely alone in my fortune. "What's the next move, Langston?" Steinberg asked as we walked back out to his car, holding the final, executed legal decrees. I pulled a pair of keys from my pocket. The keys to the new smart lock they had installed on my front door, which I had quietly copied from Terrell's keychain while he was massaging my feet. "Drive me to the sheriff's department," I said coldly. "I have an eviction order to execute." It was just after 3:00 p.m. when Steinberg's sedan pulled back onto MLK Boulevard, followed closely by a White County Sheriff's vehicle. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, sharp shadows across the front lawn. Terrell and Paige were standing on the porch, surrounded by even more boxes. When they saw the sheriff's car pull up behind us, their triumphant smiles faltered, replaced by a sudden, sharp confusion. I opened the passenger door and stepped out. I didn't use the cane. I stood completely upright, my shoulders square, walking with the steady, measured pace of a man who had spent 40 years commanding a workshop. The frail elder they thought they could warehouse was gone. Terrell walked down the porch steps, his eyes darting between me and the uniformed deputy stepping out of the second vehicle. "Dad? What's going on? Why is the police here? Did something happen at the lottery office?" Paige hurried down behind him, her voice rising in a sharp, defensive panic. "Is there a problem with the money? Did they deny the ticket?" I stopped at the edge of the driveway, standing beside Steinberg. The deputy stood just a step behind us, his hand resting casually near his belt. "There's no problem with the money," I said, my voice booming across the yard, with a clarity that made them both flinch. "The funds have cleared. The trust is fully capitalized." Paige let out a breathless laugh, clutching her chest. "Oh, thank God. You scared me to death, Langston. But why the escort? Why are the police here?" Steinberg stepped forward, pulling a thick folder from his briefcase. He extracted a bright red, certified legal document and held it out toward Tyrell. "Tyrell Bennett, Paige Bennett," Steinberg announced, his voice carrying the absolute finality of a courtroom gavel. "As the legal representative of Langston Bennett, sole owner of the property located at 452 MLK Boulevard, I am serving you with an immediate notice of eviction and a temporary restraining order." The yard went completely silent. The wind rustled through the oak tree, but neither Tyrell nor Paige seemed to be breathing. "What?" Tyrell whispered, his face losing all color. "A what?" "This is my house, Dad. We signed the papers yesterday to protect the money." "You signed a quitclaim deed, Tyrell," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "You signed away any and all legal residency, tenancy, and ownership rights to this property. You did it because you were so blinded by $80 million that you didn't bother to read the fine print. You gave me back my house." "But the trust!" Paige shrieked, her voice cracking as she lunged forward, only to be blocked by the stern movement of the deputy. "The Bennett Family Trust. We are the beneficiaries. You said we're family. You said family takes care of family. The trust is a unilaterally revocable entity under the sole discretion of the grantor," Steinberg explained with an icy calm. "And Mr. Bennett revoked your beneficiary status approximately 1 hour ago. You have no claim to the lottery winnings, no claim to the estate, and no claim to this property. Dad, you can't do this, Tyrell yelled, tears of panic finally welling in his eyes. We're your family. I'm your son. You were in a basement sleeping on an air mattress. We were just trying to help you modernize. I was in the basement because you put me there. I roared, stepping closer until Tyrell had to look up at me. I sat in a wheelchair at Mersey Hospital after having my chest sawed open, and you told me to call a cab because your football game was tied. Your wife mocked my cough, and then, while I lay downstairs on a piece of plastic, I listened to the two of you through the vents, planning to throw me into a state-funded warehouse so you could buy a condo with a pool. Paige choked on her words, her eyes widening in absolute horror as she realized the depth of her exposure. She looked at Tyrell, then at the folder in Steinberg's hand, the reality of their utter ruin finally crashing down on her. I gave you everything a father could give, I continued, my voice dropping to a low, heavy rumble. I worked double shifts until my hands bled so you could go to college. I paid your debts. I gave you a roof over your head. And the moment you thought I was weak, you tried to erase me. Well, I'm not weak, and my heart is just fine. The deputy stepped forward, tapping his notepad. You have exactly 20 minutes to take what you can carry into your vehicle. Anything left on this property after 20 minutes will be considered abandoned and disposed of. If you attempt to re-enter the dwelling or approach Mr. Bennett, you will be arrested for trespassing and violation of a restraining order. Move it. Tyrell dropped to his knees right there on the concrete driveway, sobbing into his hands, completely broken. Paige didn't look at him. She scrambled toward the porch, frantically grabbing random boxes. Her designer nails snapping against the cardboard as she tried to salvage whatever luxury items she could cram into her car. I watched them scramble like rodents in the dust they had created. I felt no anger. I felt no joy. I only felt a profound, clean sense of closure. Steinberg put a hand on my shoulder. Let's go inside, Langston. It's getting chilly out here. I nodded. I turned my back on my son and his wife, walking up the porch steps without looking back. I unlocked the front door with my own key and stepped into the foyer. The house still smelled faintly of their vanilla candles and grease, but I knew that wouldn't last. Tomorrow, I would hire a crew to tear out those sage green walls, throw away the modern beige furniture, and open every window to let the fresh air in. I would bring back the lemon oil, the pine, and the memories of the woman who had built this sanctuary with me. I walked into the living room and looked out the front window. Tyrell and Paige were throwing boxes into the trunk of their sedan, arguing bitterly, their greed finally turning inward on each other. A few minutes later, their car sped away from the curb, leaving nothing behind but the quiet rustle of the oak tree leaves. I sat down on the edge of the sofa, letting the silence of my home wash over me. My chest felt tight, the scar a physical reminder of what it took to survive. But beneath the stitches, my heart was beating steady, strong, and entirely free. I stepped onto the stage, the blinding white glare of the spotlight searing my vision. Tyrell reached out to grab my arm, trying to guide me toward the microphone, with that same patronizing, gentle touch he'd used all week. I didn't let him. I brushed his hand away with a sharp, deliberate flick of my wrist and stood up, completely straight. I didn't lean on the cane. I didn't tremble. I reached out, grabbed the microphone stand, and adjusted it upward to my full height. The silence that followed was heavy and confused. Tyrell blinked, a sudden look of unease flickering across his face. Paige's smile stiffened at the edge of the stage, her manicured fingers tightening around her champagne flute. The fragile, helpless old man they thought they were playing had vanished. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my voice echoing through the expensive speakers, deep, steady, and clear as a bell. "My son is right about one thing. Tonight is about family, and it is about trust." I looked out at the sea of 300 wealthy strangers. But before we talk about the future of the Bennett fortune, we need to take a quick look at how we got here. We need to look at the true foundation of this family's legacy. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the small remote control. I didn't look at Tyrell as his hand reached out to stop me. "Dad, what are you doing? Just say the thank yous and let's go." I pressed the button. The massive high-definition projector screen behind the stage flickered to life. But it didn't show a family slideshow. It didn't show photos of me and Coretta. It showed the interior of my study, filmed from a high, wide angle from the hidden smoke detector camera. On the screen, the footage was crystal clear. The crowd gasped as they watched Tyrell and Paige tearing through the room like manic looters. They watched Paige violently rip the covers off Coretta's prized first edition books, tossing them into a pile of trash on the floor. They heard her voice blast through the ballroom's premium audio system. "He's an old bat who should have been put in a home years ago. Get up, Tyrell. We need to find that ticket." A collective shock rippled through the ballroom. People lowered their glasses. Paige's face turned from a radiant silver to a ghastly, translucent white. "Turn it off!" Tyrell yelled, his voice cracking as he lunged for the microphone. "Dad, stop this! Turn it off right now!" The deputy standing near the back of the stage stepped forward, blocking Tyrell with a heavy, unyielding shoulder. Steinberg stood right beside him, holding a certified copy of the restraining order. I pressed the button again. The audio shifted to a crisp, digital recording from the basement vents. Paige's cold, dry laugh filled the room, sounding incredibly loud beneath the crystal chandeliers. "Oh, don't worry about where he goes after. Transfer him to a state ward. Send him to the charity ward. I don't give a damn. Just get him out of my life. Flush him." The whisper in the crowd turned into a roar of utter disgust. The very socialites Paige had spent her entire life trying to impress were staring at her with looks of horror and revulsion. Her sisterhood friends were backing away from the front row, whispering furiously behind their hands. "You think that's who they are?" I said, into the microphone, my voice cutting through their panic like a knife. "Let me show you what hurts the most." I pulled the creased, yellow pawn shop receipt from my pocket and held it up to the light. A month ago, while I was preparing for open-heart surgery, my son and his wife broke into my late wife's jewelry box. They took the Akoya pearl earrings I saved for 2 years to buy her for her 50th birthday. The pearls she wore to church every Sunday. The pearls she wanted left to her future grandchildren. I looked directly at Tyrell, whose eyes were wide with a desperate, pathetic terror. "They pawned them for $500, I said, my voice dropping to a heavy, crushing whisper. "And they spent that $500 on a single night of VIP bottle service at a nightclub. They traded 40 years of their mother's love and sacrifice for a bottle of vodka and a hangover. They replaced her pearls with $5 plastic counterfeits, hoping I'd be too blind and too stupid to notice." "Dad, please," Tyrell sobbed, dropping to his knees on the stage right in front of the microphone, his expensive tuxedo staining against the polished wood. "Please, don't do this to us. Not here. Not in front of everyone. I am not your father anymore, Terrell," I said, looking down at him, without a single drop of pity left in my soul. "The father died in the basement, while you were upstairs drinking champagne. The provider died when you changed my locks, while I was on an operating table. I am just the landlord now." Steinberg stepped up to the second microphone, opening his briefcase. As of 9 a.m. yesterday morning, Steinberg announced to the entire ballroom, Tyrell and Paige Bennett signed a legally binding, irrevocable quitclaim deed, transferring all rights, titles, and interests in the property of 452 MLK Boulevard back to Langston Bennett. Furthermore, they signed a total waiver of trust benefits. They legally own nothing. They are beneficiaries to nothing. Steinberg looked down at Paige, who was shivering so hard her silver gown looked like a shaky sheet of foil. "And as the legal representative of Mr. Bennett, I am serving you both with an immediate eviction notice for the property, effective as of 20 minutes ago. The locks have already been changed back. Your belongings have been removed from the premises and placed in a secure storage unit, the fees for which will be deducted from your remaining maximum credit limits." "The white Porsche Cayenne parked outside," I added, looking at Paige. "The dealership has already been notified that the trust will not be clearing the balance. The vehicle is being repossessed as we speak. And this party? The one you paid a $50,000 deposit for on a high-interest card you opened in my name? The bank has flagged it as fraudulent activity. The balance of $100,000 is entirely yours to bear." A loud commotion broke out at the back of the room. Two hotel managers, accompanied by 3 security guards, were already marching down the center aisle toward Paige. "Mrs. Bennett," the lead manager said, his voice cold and professional, "we need to discuss the immediate payment for this venue, or we will have to escort you from the property in handcuffs." Paige looked around the room, her eyes wild, searching for a single friendly face. But there was none. Her high society friends were already rushing for the exits, eager to distance themselves from the radioactive wreckage of her life. She looked down at her silver dress, then at the managers closing in on her, and let out a sharp, breathless sob as they took her by the arms. Tyrell remained on the floor of the stage, weeping into the hardwood, a broken, empty shell of a man who had traded his entire life for an illusion of wealth. I turned off the microphone. I walked away from the stand, stepping over my son without a backward glance. I walked down the stage steps, my stride long, confident, and entirely free of pain. Steinberg followed me out into the cool evening air. The city lights were bright, reflecting off the shiny hood of a classic, meticulously restored Cadillac parked at the curb. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. I opened it, letting the 2 pristine, milky white Akoya pearls slide into my palm. I had gone to the pawn shop at 8 a.m. yesterday morning and bought them back for exactly $500. Holding them in the moonlight, I felt their familiar, icy cool weight. They were real. They were safe. "Where to now, Langston?" Steinberg asked, unlocking the driver's door. I looked up at the night sky, feeling the steady, powerful rhythm of my new heart beating behind my ribs. "Take me home, Arthur," I said, a soft, genuine smile finally breaking across my face. "I have a lot of books to put back on the shelves." I climbed the stairs back to the stage. Terrell reached out to assist me, his palm slick with cold sweat. He tried to pull me into a hug for the audience's sake. But my body went rigid, and I refused to lean in. He quickly pulled back, covering the awkwardness with a strained chuckle. "Here he is," Terrell said, passing the microphone to me. "The man of the hour." I took the microphone. It felt incredibly heavy in my hand, heavier than any wrench I had ever held. I looked out at the sea of strangers. I looked at Paige standing in the front row, a manic glint of greed in her eyes. I looked at Tyrell beside me, sweating under the harsh lights. "Thank you all," I said. My voice was rough and gravelly, echoing through the grand hall. My son said tonight is about family. He's right. It's about seeing exactly who your family is. Terrell nodded encouragingly, expecting an emotional, sentimental speech. "I want to tell you a story," I continued. "A story about a man who loved his son deeply. This man was a mechanic. He worked with his hands. For 40 years, he came home with oil stained under his skin. He did it so his son would never have to touch a lug wrench. He did it so his son could go to college. He did it so his son could have soft hands." The room was completely quiet. People loved a self-made story. "The son grew up," I said. "He married a woman with expensive tastes. The father was happy because he thought his son had found love. But then, the father got sick. His heart began to fail. He needed surgery. He needed help." I paused. I looked directly at Paige. Her smile stiffened slightly. While the father was in the hospital, recovering in pain, he asked his son to bring him home, and the son said, "Can't do it, Dad. I'm watching the game. Just grab a cab." An uncomfortable chuckle rippled through the crowd. They thought I was joking. They thought this was a roast. Terrell laughed nervously, shifting his weight uneasily. "Good joke, Dad," he muttered under his breath. "Let's get to the point. When the father got home," I continued, my voice dropping an octave, turning colder and harder, "he found his son and daughter-in-law had changed the locks. They finally let him in, but they told him his bedroom was gone. They said his cough was too loud. They said he smelled like an old man. So, they put him in the basement." The awkward laughter vanished. The room fell into dead silence. Paige's smile was completely gone. She took a half-step forward, her eyes wide. "They made him sleep on a deflated air mattress on a concrete floor," I said. "While they slept in his bed, they ate off his wife's good china and drank his wine." "Dad!" Terrell hissed in a whisper, stepping closer to me. "Stop! You're getting confused again. This isn't the time." I turned to him, locking my eyes onto his. "I am not confused, son. I have never been clearer in my life. You see, ladies and gentlemen, my son thought I was senile. He thought the anesthesia had clouded my mind. He thought I couldn't hear them talking through the vents at night. He thought I didn't know what they were planning. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the remote control. They wanted the money," I said. "They wanted the 80 million, but they didn't want the father attached to it. They wanted the trust, but they didn't want the obligation. So, they made a plan. A plan to warehouse the old man in a facility. A plan to declare him incompetent. A plan to erase him." Tyrell lunged for my arm. "Give me the mic!" he roared, the good son mask slipping away to reveal pure panic. "Cut the mic! Someone! Shut it down!" But Steinberg had handed the audio technician a $500 tip before the party started. The microphone stayed wide open. I shook off Terrell's grip. I pointed the remote at the massive projector screen behind us, the one that was supposed to play a montage of our happy family life. "But why should I just tell you, when I can show you?" I said. I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. The footage was grainy, black and white video from a hidden camera. It was my living room. The timestamp read 3 days ago. The audio boomed through the speakers with perfect digital clarity. Paige's sharp, venomous voice filled the ballroom. "He smells like a dead man, Tyrell. I can't take it anymore. We need to get him out." The crowd let out a collective gasp. On the screen, Paige paced with a glass of wine, kicking my old shoes out of the way. "Just give it 1 more week," Tyrell's voice echoed from the speakers. "We get him to sign the papers, and then we drop him off at the state facility. Who cares if it smells like boiled cabbage? He won't last a year anyway." On stage, Tyrell's face turned white as a sheet. He looked at the screen, then at the crowd, looking exactly like a deer caught in high beams. "That's fake!" he yelled, waving his hands. "That's AI generated. That's not real." The video cut to a new clip. The kitchen. Tyrell stood by the counter, holding my wallet. He was sliding out the $60 in emergency cash I kept there. The pizza money. He chuckled on screen, shoving the cash into his pocket. The old man doesn't need cash in the basement. What's he gonna buy? Feed the mice? A woman in the front row put her hand over her mouth. A man in the back let out a loud hiss. The video shifted one last time. The master bedroom. Paige sat at the vanity, holding Coretta's jewelry box. She held up the pearl earrings. "These are worth a few hundred," she said, appraising them. "Let's pawn them. We need a table at Velocity tonight. The old lady doesn't need them anymore. She's dead." That was the fatal blow. The mention of my late wife. The desecration of her memory. The room completely turned. The atmosphere instantly shifted from shock to pure hostility. These people were wealthy and exclusive, but even they had a line that couldn't be crossed. Discarding a deceased mother's tokens for bottle service was a sin they could not excuse. Paige screamed. It was a wild howl of pure rage and humiliation. She charged the stage. "Turn it off," she shrieked, clawing at the air. "Shut it down, you old fool! Down, you old fool!" I pressed the button one final time. The screen went black. I looked down at Paige. She was standing at the foot of the stage, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You wanted the spotlight, Paige," I said into the microphone. "You wanted everyone to know who you are. Now they know." I turned back to Tyrell. He was shaking, looking like he was about to vomit. "And you," I said, my voice quiet but magnified by the speakers. "You wanted to be the man of the house. You wanted to be a leader. But men pay their own bills, son. Men protect their families. Men don't steal from their fathers, sleep in their beds, and leave them to rot in a cellar." Tyrell lunged at me. He had lost all control. He raised his fist, preparing to strike his own father on a stage in front of 300 witnesses. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. But Steinberg did. He gestured to the side of the stage, and 2 imposing security guards who had been waiting in the wings rushed out. They tackled Tyrell before he got within 3 feet of me, pinning his arms behind his back and forcing him to his knees. "Let me go!" Tyrell kicked and screamed, struggling against their grip. "That's my money! He stole my money!" I looked down at him kneeling on the stage. "It was never your money," I said. "Never." I looked back out at the crowd. "The show is over, folks," I said. "The bar is closed, and the bill is due." I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a deafening thud, a final punctuation mark to the evening. I walked down the stairs, passing Paige, who was sobbing on the floor, and moved through the stunned guests, who parted like the Red Sea. Steinberg walked beside me, briefcase in hand. We headed for the exit, leaving the chaos behind. I could hear the shouts, the accusations, and the sound of a world collapsing. And for the first time in a very long time, my heart didn't hurt at all. It felt light, clean, and completely free. The heavy silence in the grand ballroom was suffocating. Tyrell remained on his knees, his tuxedo pants straining against his frame as the two guards held him fast. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot, filled with a mixture of rage and terror. The guests who had been sipping expensive champagne just minutes prior were backing away, forming a wide circle around the wreckage of my family. They watched with a morbid fascination, like onlookers at a disaster. Paige stood at the edge of the stage, her chest heaving. Strays of mascara ran down her face like black ink, ruining the makeup that had taken her hours to prepare. "You can't do this," Tyrell whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of denial. "The trust. We signed the papers. We're the beneficiaries. You said it would be ours in 90 days. Steinberg stepped forward, opening his briefcase with a sharp click. He extracted the document Tyrell and Paige had signed just 24 hours earlier with eager greed. He held it up to the lights for everyone to see. "You did sign the papers, son," Steinberg said, his voice carrying to the back of the room without needing a microphone. "You signed a quitclaim deed, transferring all rights to the house to Langston. You also signed a waiver of trust benefits for the Bennett Family Trust. But you failed to read the fine print of the trust structure itself." "What fine print?" Paige screamed, stepping forward. "We're his family. Who else would the money go to?" I took the microphone back. It felt icy cold in my hand. "I did establish a trust yesterday," I said, my voice steady and unyielding. "But it wasn't a family trust. It was a charitable remainder trust." Tyrell blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, leaning down so he could hear every syllable, "that the $80 million is already gone. Every single dime was wired out at 9:00 a.m. this morning." "Where?" Paige shrieked. "To your account?" "No," I said. "To the Coretta Bennett Foundation." My late wife's name hung in the air. I saw a few older guests nod in recognition. They remembered her kindness. "I donated the entire jackpot," I continued. "The funds will build affordable housing for seniors. It will pay for medical care for elders who have been abandoned by their families. It will ensure that no one ever has to sleep in a basement on a piece of plastic because their children wanted a yoga studio." "You gave it away?" Tyrell choked out. "You gave $80 million away?" "I didn't give it to strangers," I corrected him. "I invested it in people who deserve it. People who understand the value of a dollar. People who would never pawn their mother's legacy for a bottle of liquor." "You're lying," Paige hissed. "You're just saying that to hurt us. You would never throw away that kind of wealth. You're too tight. You're a miser." Steinberg pulled another document. From his bag, a wire confirmation slipped straight from the Lottery Commission to the nonprofit's escrow account. "The paperwork is complete, Mrs. Bennett," Steinberg said coldly. "The money is gone. The trust is irrevocable. Langston Bennett does not have $80 million, and neither do you." The reality hit them like a physical blow. I watched the hope drain from their eyes as their dreams of Malibu mansions and private jets vanished into thin air. They weren't millionaires. They were just two broke individuals in expensive clothes they couldn't afford, standing in a room that now despised them. "But we still have the house," Tyrell stammered, trying to find a piece of debris to cling to. We still have the house on MLK Boulevard. That land is valuable. We can sell it. We can start over. I shook my head slowly. You don't have the house either, son. You signed the quitclaim deed. Remember, you transferred it to me. Then, give it back to us, Terrell pleaded. Just give us the house, Dad, please. We have nowhere else to go. Although, I don't have the house either, I said. What? Paige asked. I sold it, I said, this morning, while you were getting your hair done. While Terrell was picking up his tuxedo, I met with a developer who has wanted that block for years. I took a cash offer, 50% below market value, just to close the deal immediately. You sold our home? Terrell whispered. It was my home, I snapped. You were just freeloading in it. And the new owner took possession an hour ago. He sent a crew to change the locks and clear out the garbage. The garbage? Paige gasped. Our things? Your things are on the curb, I said. Or they will be by the time you get back, if the scavengers haven't taken them already. It was total devastation. They had nothing left. No money, no house, no future. At that exact moment, Tyrell broke down. The reality of his absolute ruin crushed whatever composure he had left. He let out a primal roar, throwing his weight against the guards. He broke one arm free and lunged toward me, his fingers clawing for my throat. I'll end you, he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. I'll end you, old man, the crowd shrieked. I stood my ground, looking at the violence in his eyes, seeing a complete stranger. The guard slammed Tyrell back into the floor, face down. I heard the air rush out of his lungs. The second guard put a knee into his back, pinning him flat. Tyrell thrashed and cursed, shouting profanities that made the high society guests cover their ears. Get him off him, Paige screamed, running toward Tyrell. Let him go. She raised her hand to strike the guard. It was a foolish mistake. The guard caught her wrist mid-air. He didn't hurt her, but his grip was unyielding. That's assault, lady, he said flatly. Suddenly, the double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. It wasn't the police, at least, not yet. It was the hotel manager, a Mr. Sterling, looking absolutely furious. Behind him were two men in cheap suits carrying clipboards. Mr. Bennett, the manager called out, striding through the crowd. Mr. Tyrell Bennett. Tyrell lifted his head from the floor, his face pressed against the carpet. What? He spat. Your credit card has been declined. The manager announced loudly, ensuring everyone heard. We attempted to process the final balance for the catering, venue, and bar bill. Insufficient funds. We tried the backup card, declined. We tried your wife's card, declined. The total bill is $150,000, and unless you can provide a valid form of payment right now, I am calling the authorities for theft of services. Of course they were declined, I thought. I had called the credit card fraud department this morning. I reported every account Paige opened in my name as unauthorized. I froze everything. 150,000? Terrell groaned into the carpet. We're next, one of the men with the clipboard said, stepping forward. He looked down at Terrell, then at Paige. Are you Paige Bennett? Get away from me, she hissed. You've been served, the man said, dropping a thick stack of papers at her feet. Lawsuit from the Porsche dealership. You provided a fraudulent check for the down payment. They are demanding immediate return of the vehicle. The second man stepped up. Subpoenas from the furniture boutique, the travel agency, and the wedding planner. The lawsuits, the summonses, and the payment demands fell over them like confetti. The debt they had piled up in 48 hours, based on a lie, was burying them alive. Steinberg looked over at me, checking his watch. "Perfect timing," he whispered. And then came the sirens. We could hear them wailing outside, getting closer. The guests began to scatter, rushing for the exits, terrified of being connected to the disaster unfolding on stage. The police entered the ballroom, 4 uniformed officers looking thoroughly unimpressed. They saw the guards pinning Tyrell and Page screaming at the process servers. "What's going on here?" the sergeant demanded. "This woman attempted to assault my staff," the guard said, pointing at Page. "Arrête, and this man tried to attack his father." "Arrest them," I said, stepping forward. My voice was calm and cold. "I want to press charges. Intention to do bodily harm, elder abuse, and financial fraud." "Fraud?" Page shrieked. "You're the fraud! You conned us!" "I didn't con you," I said. "I tested you, and you failed." The officers hauled Tyrell off the floor. He was crying now, his anger replaced by a pathetic, sobbing terror. They clicked the handcuffs around his wrists. The cold snap of the metal was the final punctuation mark to his ambitions. "Dad, please," he sobbed, fluid running from his nose. "Dad, don't let them take me. I'm your son." I looked at him, the man who had abandoned me at the hospital, the man who had put me in the basement. "I don't have a son," I said. "My son passed away a long time ago." They handcuffed Paige as well. She kicked and screamed, cursing me, cursing Tyrell, cursing the world. They dragged them out through the kitchen doors to avoid disturbing the remaining hotel patrons. Steinberg and I followed them out to the main entrance. The valet area was in complete chaos, but right in the center of the driveway, a flatbed tow truck was backing up to the white Porsche Cayenne. "No!" Paige screamed as she was shoved into the back of a cruiser. "Don't take my car. Anything but the car." The tow driver hooked the chains around the axle, lifting the pristine white SUV into the air. The car alarm began to wail, a rhythmic tone that sounded like a death knell for their vanity. I watched them get driven away in the back of the police cars. I watched the tow truck haul their dream car down the street. I watched the hotel manager talking to another officer, gesturing toward the warm, abandoned champagne inside. They had lost everything. Their home, their transportation, their reputation, and their freedom. Steinberg placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Langston." I looked out at the empty driveway, feeling the cool night wind on my face. My chest still ached from the surgery, but the crushing weight of betrayal was completely gone. "Let's go," I said. "Where to?" Steinberg asked. "The airport," I said. "I have a flight to catch." I didn't look back. I walked away from the luxury hotel and the ruins of my family. I hailed a cab, not a limousine, just a regular yellow taxi. The driver looked at me through the mirror. "Where to, boss?" "The terminal," I said. "Turn off the meter. I'm buying out the night." I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about anyone else. I only had to take care of myself. I was 70 years old. I had a heart condition. I was alone. But as the cab merged onto the highway, heading toward the future I had chosen, I realized I had never felt more alive. The surgery had repaired my heart, but tonight I had saved my soul. 3 months have passed since the night the police dragged my son away in handcuffs from the Ritz-Carlton. The legal fallout was swift and merciless. Tyrell and Page began turning on each other before they could even post bail. Their divorce wasn't about dividing assets, because they had none. It was a division of debt. They argued over who was responsible for the credit card fraud, who was to blame for the bad checks, and who had ruined their lives. In the end, the judge granted the split, but he couldn't grant them dignity. I heard through two old acquaintances that Tyrell is currently working the fryer at a fast food joint on the south side. The boy who refused to get oil under his fingernails now comes home every night, smelling of old grease and onions. A friend of mine stopped by there last week and said he saw a manager barely out of high school yelling at Tyrell for dropping a basket of fries. Tyrell just stood there, head down, taking it. He looks 20 years older, his arrogance thoroughly ground down by reality. He lives in a studio apartment above a laundromat, no 85-inch TV, no designer candles, just a mattress on the floor, and the steady drone of machines for company. Paige didn't fare any better when the collection agencies started calling her parents' house. They finally did the math and realized their daughter was a liability. They threw her out. The last I heard, she was bouncing between the couches of the few friends who hadn't blocked her number yet, dodging process servers and trying to sell her designer clothes online for pennies on the dollar. She wanted a life of luxury and ended up with a life on the run. As for me, I am thousands of miles away, far from the smell of fast food and the noise of the city. The sun is setting over the Mediterranean Sea, painting the water in shades of violet and gold. I am sitting on the deck of a yacht I've rented for the month. I'm not alone. Steinberg is here, his fishing hat pulled low over his eyes as he does as lightly in a lounge chair. Two other friends from the old neighborhood, the brothers who stayed by my side when Coretta passed and never asked for a dime, are playing dominoes at the table behind me. My chest doesn't hurt anymore. The scar remains. A silver line down my sternum, but the heart beneath it beats strong and steady. The salty sea air fills my lungs, clearing out the last remnants of the basement dampness. I feel healthy. I feel vital. I feel like a man who has been given a second chance at life, and I am not wasting a single second of it. On the teak table next to my iced tea sits a stack of folders. They are applications for the Coretta Bennett Vocational Scholarship, a program we launched last month. It pays full tuition and tool costs for young men and women who want to learn a trade: mechanics, plumbers, electricians. The people who build the world, the people who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. I read their essays, seeing their hunger and their respect for hard work. These kids are my legacy now. They are the children I should have had. I signed the application of a young girl from Detroit who wants to open her own auto shop. She reminds me of Coretta, tough and smart. I write a personal note on her acceptance letter, telling her never to let anyone tell her she's just a mechanic. My phone buzzes on the table. It's a sound I'm not used to anymore, since I keep it off most of the time. I pick it up. A message notification flashes on the screen from a number I deleted but recognized instantly. Tyrell. I open it. It's a long wall of text. Dad, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I'm working hard now. I'm trying, but rent is due and I'm hungry. Please, Dad, just a little help. I miss you. I love you. I look at the words. 3 months ago, they might have twisted my stomach. They might have made me feel guilty, making me wonder if I had been too harsh. But today, looking out at the endless blue horizon, I feel absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, and no love. Just a profound, clean indifference. To me, he is a stranger who tried to bury me and now wants me to dig him out. I don't finish reading the text. I don't reply. I stand up and walk to the railing of the yacht, the water spraying white foam against the hull below. I hold the phone out over the edge, the final anchor connecting me to a past that is dead and gone. I let go. The phone tumbles down, catching the silver flash of the setting sun, before disappearing into the deep blue with a soft splash. Steinberg grunts from his chair, shifting his hat. "You dropped something, Langston?" "Just some trash," I say, smiling, clearing the deck. I turn my back on the sea and walk over to the domino table. "Deal me in," I say, sliding into a chair. "I'm feeling lucky today." My friends laugh and make room for me. The tiles clack against the table, a steady rhythm of companionship and peace. The sun dips below the horizon, ending the day, but for me, it feels like the morning has just begun. I am Langston Bennett. I am 70 years old, and my life is just starting. I look back honestly at my choices. I stayed silent for too long, trusted the wrong people, and paid the price. My advice is simple. Don't live like I did. Protect your dignity early. This family betrayal showed me how a household story crumbles when greed replaces respect. When my own strength failed, I looked for guidance. When the lies crowded in, I looked for clarity. And when the truth finally stood up, I found my peace. I believe that blood alone does not define loyalty. This turning point became a lesson, not an excuse for hatred. I share this journey hoping you won't repeat my mistakes, because even within a home, betrayal often hides behind a smile.